Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out now, the Funk Soul Brother. Right about now, the Funk Soul.
They're gonna run out of cheeseheads soon.
The Funk Soul Brother. Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Check it out now, the Funk Soul Brother. Right about now, the Funk Soul Brother. Right about now, about now, about now, about now.
What is poppin', y'all? It's your man, Cloutboy Bells, and welcome to another episode of Wisco Sports. Obviously, today's video, as you can see in the title, we are going to be discussing the 2018 Brewers team. Where are they now? Of course, you know, I like to do things where we talk 5 years from now, something that great happens in Wisconsin sports. That 2018 team was honestly one of the most memorable teams ever. This, obviously, one of the most, going back to that start of the season, nobody had even thought the Brewers would even have a chance to be a contending team. They traded for Lorenzo Cain and Christian Yelich and signed Christian Yelich, traded for Christian Yelich and signed Lorenzo Cain on the same day, including a bunch of other people. You know, we had tools from the previous season. They almost went on a run and made the playoffs. Everyone thought the Brewers were going to be a highly underrated team, a highly undervalued team, and this was definitely something that was super, super, super exciting to just think of. And it was the start of the right direction. You know, this 2018 season was the first season that Craig Counsell made the playoffs. We had so much exciting players stepping up. I mean, this was, you know, so many great players. And then, of course, this was also the year that Christian Yelich broke out into his prime years, and he won the MVP, 2 cycles, and all this couple walk-offs, and unbelievable crazy games, unbelievable crazy memories, walk-offs, and it was one of the most unbelievable. I mean, it was crazy. And then the playoffs happened. We beat the Cubs in game 163 and almost went to the World Series, 1 game away, unfortunately losing to the Dodgers in game 7 at home, which was heartbreaking. But there were so many memories from that season. But when you look at it, it's like, where are all these players now? Like, all the players that were on that roster, almost all of them, I mean, thinking about it, they're all not on the team anymore. So I decided, you know, yesterday to just do some research, look into it, and be like, wow. So anyways, without further ado, I mean, this is my video on where the 2018 Brewers are now. In my opinion, I think I'd rank the 2018 team the 3rd best team in Brewers history. That's where I rank them. You know, I think right now the 82 Brewers and the 2011 would be, of course, above them, but it's everyone's opinions. But if you like what you see, subscribe below, comment with your thoughts, and let's get down to business. So I'm going to obviously go from alphabetical order, and I'm obviously going to, like, you know, talk about the people who made the big significant impact, basically our starting lineup and pitching lineup for basically anybody. And mainly they made an impact throughout the season and the playoffs. So without further ado, here we go. So the first player I have on this list is Jesus Aguilar. He made the All-Star team that season, and this was a huge breakout season for him. He was one of our pinch hitters the previous season, and then injuries kind of plagued. He came up, and then all of a sudden, he just could not be stopped. Before the All-Star break, he was having one of the best seasons out of any first baseman ever. Dude couldn't even miss, and then he started to slow things down. And, you know, but he was a huge impact player, and honestly, one of the huge reasons why the Brewers had a lot of success in that season. Unfortunately, his career did not really live up to that. After the 2018 season, the 2019 season, he was having an absolutely terrible year, ended up getting traded to Tampa Bay Rays, and then, you know, he kind of was swapping on teams, spent a lot of time on Miami, and was most recently this year on the Oakland Athletics before he was recently cut by them. He is right now a free agent, and honestly, I would love to have them bring him back, just because I think the Brewers could use a hitter right now, but he has not been the same hitter as he ever has been from that 2018 year. And, you know, it sucks to see that, but I guess, you know, hopefully he gets another chance, or that would suck for him. Next up, we have starting pitcher Chase Anderson. In the 2017 season, Chase Anderson was our ace. He was having an outstanding season. Then the next year, he was plagued by injuries and not having himself a good season at all. And, you know, I never was a big fan of him anyways, but, you know, he's there and, you know, I don't know. But the 2019 season, he had actually a decent season and actually was a huge part of the 2019 team. And then obviously he was a free agent, he was cut. And then he was just kind of swapping from team to team, and right now he's part of the Rockies organization. I don't know if he's a starter or a bullpen pitcher, but when I looked him up, that's where I saw he was at. So pretty much I think he is at the end of his career since he is pretty much a lot older than he once was. But, you know, I guess he wasn't the greatest player on that team, but he was there and a starting pitcher, so I guess you could say that. Next up, we have our shortstop, Orlando Arcia. When you think of Orlando Arcia now, you think of how bad our hitting coaches were, because all of a sudden he's on the Atlanta Braves right now, actually hitting over 300 and playing very well. When he was on the Brewers, he was barely over 200. He couldn't do anything, and then all of a sudden in the postseason, he randomly started to play really well, and it just was random. But Arcia was just an experiment and a guy I really had high hopes for, and it just turned out he never was that guy. I liked him. He had some great defense, don't get me wrong, but throughout the years, just never could do it. And you know that they ended up trading him, and now they're trying Willy Adames, and now we're seeing that Willy Adames is doing the same exact thing. Plays terrible offense, plays great defense. I don't know. So, unfortunately, I don't know what it is about the hitting coaches. I think our hitting coaches now suck. It really proves that Orlando Arcia could not develop, and then all of a sudden he goes in Atlanta and plays phenomenal. I don't get it. Next up, Ryan Braun. Of course, our 2011 MVP, you know, was at the very end of his career, and he was a veteran on this very young roster full of, you know, younger people, but, you know, he was obviously the guy, the veteran. He was doing all the work, and, you know, we're thankful for Ryan Braun. He always was a GOAT, you know, and, you know, obviously he spent the rest of his career with the Brewers. His last season with the team was in 2020, where he spent a full year as a free agent in 2021, where he eventually decided to call it quits and retire a one-day contract with the Brewers. Now, obviously, he's one of the greatest players to ever do it, so that's good for him. Next up, Keon Broxton, a guy that was kind of going in and out of our minor league system, and then ended up making the postseason roster because, of course, his defense in the outfield is spectacular. I was a huge Keon Broxton fan, but pretty much after that, he never was the same player. After the 2018 season, the 2019 season was pretty much the last season that he ever spent in the majors. He literally was on 3 separate teams, and then he was never heard of again. Right now, I think he's on the Kansas City Monarchs of the American Association League. That's where he is right now. Weird how things kind of turn in the last couple of years. Next up, Corbin Burns. That was his first year playing in the majors. He was called up. He was mainly playing relief time as a multi-inning pitcher, and he was looking really good. Dude literally looked like, when you look at him from then and now, he looks like a completely different person. And then all of a sudden, a couple years later, Corbin Burns wins a Cy Young Award and is considered one of the best pitchers in baseball. I don't know how that happens. Pretty much, I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded soon, but you know what? Honestly, he's one of the best pitchers to ever play for the Brewers. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. Next up, Lorenzo Cain, a.k.a. Mr. Gold Glove. Not today. Man, I love Lorenzo Cain. Unfortunately, his career, you know, ended rather soon last year, where he was cut in the middle of last season. But he was the big pioneer of this Brewers team as the leadoff hitter. He honestly could have won MVP with how well he played defensively and all that, but you know what? He was such a great role model, a great player. You know, and then Gold Glove winner in 2019. After that, it just wasn't really the same, but then he got cut, and then a couple months ago, he decided to call it quits and signed a one-day contract with the Royals to retire since he won the World Series with them. But overall great player. A lot of people forget he was drafted by the Brewers, but obviously he was one of the best to ever do it for sure. Next up, Ulysse Chassin. He was our ace that season. Had an unbelievable season. Was really unstoppable. He just looked like fantastic. He just is having that season, and the 2019 season came, and he was so bad that he was sent down in the minors. Never pretty much seen from again by anybody. His last time ever in the majors was last year. He was a bullpen pitcher for the Rockies, and now he's currently a free agent. He went downhill pretty fast. Dude was so good in 2018. I mean, I have no idea what happened. How he went from being an ace pitcher to just awful. So, honestly, anything can happen. You never know. Next up, Zach Davies. He was our young pitcher that I think a lot of people had so much faith in, and then he just never turned out to be that player. After the 2018 season, he didn't make as much of an impact, but then he was on the 2019 team, was a full-time starter, had a good season, and then the Brewers just gave up on him, traded him away for, I think, Eric Lauer and Luis Arias to try to start a rebuild, maybe. And then he was on the Padres, and then he was on the Cubs, and now he's on the Diamondbacks. So pretty much he's just a guy that's been at different teams already, and I don't think he'll ever be that pitcher for anybody. He just doesn't seem to, he kind of just seems to be struggling at the moment, but sucks for him. Next up, Curtis Granderson. I honestly forgot he was part of that team. We literally signed him late in that season. The longtime veteran was, he didn't really make as much of an impact, but yeah, he was a great player. I mean, he always was a great player. Made the postseason roster, didn't do much, but Granderson was always, a great player. He spent one more season with the Miami Marlins and then retired right after that. Gio Gonzalez, a guy that we traded in the middle of the season, ended up being in the starting rotation, and ended up being an absolute weapon. He was great. I wish they would have used him more. I don't know. I just don't know if Council had a problem with him. I don't know what it was. But pretty much after that, I think he spent some time with the Brewers in the 2019 season. Then they just decided to get rid of him and all this other stuff. And then he was never seen or heard from again. I think he was on the Cubs for a little bit in the 2020 season. Then he was gone. But he retired. That was pretty much that. Next up, Junior Guerra. He was a signing. We signed him, and I thought he was going to be really good. And then he was a starting pitcher. Then he kind of got injured, and then he moved to the bullpen because he was one of those guys that just could not play really well in every single inning. He became a bullpen pitcher in the 2019 season, and then was just completely forgotten as everyone else was, and is still a free agent. I'm surprised he hasn't retired with how old he is, but oh well. Next up, Josh Hader. Oh, man. Last year, we traded him to the Padres. He was honestly looked at as one of the greatest relievers in Brewers history. Second most saves in team history. Sucked that we had to trade him, but, I mean, it had to happen. But he's on the Padres and is still one of the best relievers in baseball. So, that's for sure. Next up, Jeremy Jeffress, our closer that season, in the 2018 season. He was having one of the best seasons ever. Then the postseason came, and he just stunk. Then 2019 came. He still stunk. He couldn't go back to his form, and the team just gave up on him and parted ways. Then he was on the Cubs in the 2020 season, had a great season, and now he's, I believe, he was in the Japan League for a little bit, and someone could have called him, but I think he's just now a free agent, and I feel like at this point he'll retire because no team has called him yet, and that sucks because I was a huge fan of him, but oh well. Next up, our other relief pitcher who made a high impact, Corey Knebel. In the 2017 season, he was one of the best relievers in baseball. Pretty much he was going to be that guy, and then injuries kind of plagued him throughout that year. He became a huge member of the bullpen and still came out and closed a lot of games. We didn't really have a significant closer. He started out as our closer, and then things kind of came open, and then Knebel just was doing a lot of things. I like Knebel, but after that, the 2019 season came. He ended up getting Tommy John surgery on it, so he missed that full season. The 2020 season came, he still wasn't back to his old form. Then 2 years later, he ends up joining the Phillies to be their closer. He had an okay season, and now he's just a free agent. I don't know what happened to him, but that sucks for him. Next up, Eric Kratz, our catcher. One of our catchers, the 39-year-old catcher. We had a 39-year-old catcher, a journey veteran. I loved him. It was great to see a guy that had leadership. The very next season, he was unfortunately cut during the Cactus League because they signed us Manny Grandal, and we already had Manny Pena, so they didn't need him, and then he retired because that was unfortunate for him. Next up, Wade Miley. He was our best pitcher in that postseason. He was really pitching well, and I'm glad the Brewers brought him back, but it sucks that he just hasn't been healthy. I get he's old now, but you know what? He was a great pitcher. I wish we could have re-signed him because I think he would have done well. I mean, he had 2 no-hitters with the Reds when the Reds signed him, and then he kind of went from team to team, and now he's back with us. So, you know what? He's injured now. He hasn't played, but he started out good, It's a good thing. Next up, Mike Moustakas, a guy that we traded for in the middle of the season with the Royals. He had a walk-off in the playoffs. He's always been a great third baseman. Already was a champion. We got a guy like that because we knew we were going somewhere. Dude was a great player. And then after that, he was he was already past his prime years. The 2019 season, he had an absolutely outstanding season, was an all-star. And then after that, he was on the Reds for a couple seasons, and now he's on the Rockies. Everything just seems to kind of be going downhill a little bit. And I think he's at the end of his career. Next up, Freddie Peralta. Right now, of course, he's one of our starting pitchers. 2018 was his first year with the team. He kind of was starting out, and then now he's, still with the team. So he's one of our starting pitchers, signed a major contract, and pretty much he's been one of our longest tenured players. Next up, Hernan Perez, our utility guy. You could plug him in anywhere. He was a great player. He lasted with the Brewers in the 2018 and 2019. I think he was with the team in maybe 2020, but yeah, I think he might have been. But pretty much he was a guy that you could just plug in anywhere, but an overall great role player. Wasn't fantastic, but could do the right things at the right time. I think he kind of swapped from different teams, and now he's trying to make a major league roster spot. I think he's with the Twins minor league system right now. I think that's where he is. I don't know if he got cut but that's where I think he is. Next up, Manny Pena. After the 2021 season, he was traded to the Atlanta Braves. Oh, actually, no, he was signed by the Atlanta Braves. Then the Braves just recently traded him They traded him to Oakland. So now he's on Oakland, but I don't even think he's played in like 2 years because of injuries, which kind of sucks, but is oh well. But he was always a great catcher, our starting catcher that year. Sucks to suck, but yeah. Next up, Domingo Santana. This man took the biggest hit out of anybody in their entire career. Santana went from hitting 30 home runs in 2017 to being a player in 2018 that was doing so bad that he had to be sent down. Then they called him up, and then he started looking like himself again. And then after that season, he was cut, and he was never to be heard from again. I think he's in the Japanese league, if I'm correct. That really took a dip on his career. And the problem that was sucked because he was so young at the time. So, like, literally, that really sucked for him. Next up, we have second baseman Jonathan Schoop. I honestly kept forgetting that he was a Brewer. Obviously traded from the Baltimore Orioles. Obviously known for being a great hitter. A great defensive player. Really didn't live up to his hype with the Brewers, but he was a guy that was there. Then he kind of went swapping from team, and now he's still, I believe, on the Detroit Tigers. I think he's still on there, if I'm correct. But he's part of that team. He's still in the league, that's for sure. Next up, third baseman Travis Shaw. The mayor of Ding Dong City was one of our best players that season. He had back-to-back seasons in 2017 and 2018 where he hit 30-plus home runs. And then 2019, he really took a huge fall, was so bad that the team just decided to move on from him. And then 2020 kind of spent it with some other teams. 2021, they gave him another chance. They signed him to a minor league contract, and then they knew they were going to, because of his veteranship with the team, they decided to bring him back up. He made a huge impact right away, but then 2 months into the season, or 2 months into the season, he dislocated his shoulder, and pretty much the Brewers are on such a hot streak that they signed so many people, and they didn't have room to bring him back, so they cut him. And then he finished his career with the Boston Red Sox, which was the team that drafted him and where he started his career. And just recently, he retired. So, you know what? On and off career, but he was a great member of this organization. Next up, Joakim Soria. I honestly forgot he was part of this team, but he was one of our high-ranked relief pitchers that we traded for in the middle of the season. And he had a great ERA, great player. I thought he did a great season. And then after that, he kind of just was at the end of his career. I think the last team he was with that terrible Diamondbacks team. And then he retired. And that was pretty much that. Brent Suter. A lot of people forgot that season, Brent Suter was a starter. And then he got an injury, a Tommy John injury, where he was out for the season. But he was the first 2/3 of the season he was playing. He was looking really good, and then the Tommy John happened, and then that really sucked for him. Pretty much spent the rest of that season in the 2019 season injured, and then he came back being a role player and a bullpen pitcher throughout the rest of the next couple of years. And then obviously the team decided to part ways with him, and he is now on the Colorado Rockies. Next up, first baseman Eric Thames. What a legend that he was. Eric Thames, my goodness. I always loved him. You know, he spent that amazingly that he had 30-plus home runs in 2017. Then 2018, he was just such a dominant player. But he spent a lot of it injured. He spent a lot of it injured, unfortunately, which was why Jesus Aguilar really shone. He didn't even play in the postseason because of how deep we were. But he was obviously a great player. 2019 came, and then Thames was, of course, still part of the team, doing all the stuff he did. Then the team just decided to move on from him. He spent 1 season in 2020 with the Washington Nationals, and then spent 1 or 2 seasons back in the Japan League, which is where he was for a little while. And then he retired, and now is a household favorite for the Brewers. I don't know, just kind of happened that way. Next up, Brandon Woodruff. The fact that he was a relief pitcher, he didn't even play throughout that entire season. He was there, and then he made his moment shine in the playoffs, hitting a home run off of Clayton Kershaw in Game 1. Imagine a pitcher hitting a lefty pitcher hitting a home run off one of the greatest pitchers in baseball in a playoff game. Then the 2019 season came, and it was the season where he became a full-time starter, really broke out on the scene, played phenomenal, and now he's considered one of the best pitchers to ever play with the Brewers. He right now has the best ERA in team history. Pretty crazy stuff how Brandon Woodruff really journeyed from the player that he once was, and now he's still part of the team. And finally, the final player, Christian Yelich, still with the team, signed this major contract. He has not been the same, obviously, since the 2018 and 2019 seasons. Obviously, being injured, maybe mental issues. There was just been some, mental health was a problem. His injuries were a problem. He was never the same player, but he was always, a Brewer, and that's what's important. But without further ado, that's that. That's our entire team. Literally, out of this entire list, only 5 players are still with the Brewers. And really, 4 of them remain with the Brewers since 2018. So, that's pretty insane. That out of the 20-plus people that I read, only 5 are still with the team after 5 seasons. That's crazy. So, without further ado, if you like what you see, subscribe below, comment with your thoughts, and more content will come soon. We will see you next time.